Welcome to the Canyons Are Calling podcast. I'm Cheryl's Jocelyn, your host for the show. So, a lot of you know that I manage Imlay Canyon Gear and Canyoneering USA. And so, with that, we deal with a lot of customers from across the world, really. And so I decided that it would be a cool idea to help spread the word of the podcast to put a little sticker on all of the receipts that just say, check out the Canyons Are Calling podcast. And so I sent out an order to some people at Georgia Tech, and I received an email shortly after that from Hill Belfi. It says, I can't believe there is finally a canyoneering podcast. Okay, Atlanta, Georgia might not be your first thought of a small but mighty hub of canyoneers, but what the Southeast lacks in canyons, we make up for in abundant waterfalls, deep mountain creeks. Bowls, dry canyons, crowds, never heard of them. But if you're still interested and want to learn more about cascading, let me know. So I reached out to her, asked her if she wanted to be a guest on the show. She never really thought that's what I was going for, but anyway, we finally set up an interview. And Hill is here to tell you all about cascading. So, who is Hill Belfi? Hill is a 22-year-old resident of Atlanta, Georgia, a senior at Georgia Institute of Technology studying biomedical engineering. Her name, Hill, is her mother's maiden name. Her love of the mountain sports are just a coincidence. She grew up in Atlanta and spent her weekends as a kid solving scavenger hunts, playing soccer, reading every adventure story she could get her hands on, and in the Blue Ridge Mountains, kayaking, rock hopping, and hiking. Once at Georgia Tech, she joined the Outdoor Rec Club and got into cascading. She goes way more into that in the interview. Before COVID, she was interning with Johnson & Johnson Medical Device Division, working on manufacturing needles and sutures. When she's not rappelling waterfalls, you can find her working in medicine shop on campus, scouting out taco places in Atlanta, playing guitar, and watching The Bachelor with her roommates. She not only is a biomedical engineering student, she's a wilderness first responder, an avid houseplant parent, and president of one of the biggest college outdoor programs in the country, an enthusiastic member of Natural Anchors Club, and a proud cascader, a canyoneer in a place without canyons. So the interview with Hill is again on my old way of recording because I was having some technical difficulties the day that I had the interview. So I'm sorry about some of the sound quality, but I do have my new studio set up and I have figured out how to make all my systems work together. So this should be my last shitty sounding recording. I really apologize for the sound, my dog barking a couple times. But I really hope you enjoy the show. Let's get on to what is cascading with Hill Belfi. All right. So, Hill, can you tell us just a little bit about where you grew up and your life as a child?
Yeah, sure. So my name's Hill, just Hill, like the landform, and I'm Atlanta born and bred, so I grew up here. I'm a biomedical engineering student at Georgia Tech, so we're right in the heart of the city. And I've always loved solving problems, even as a kid. That was, scavenger hunts or obstacle courses or puzzles. Like my brain's always kind of worked like that. And I spent a lot of time outside as a kid, especially with my dad, up in the mountains of North Carolina. So that's like the Blue Ridge or the Smoky Mountains. Um, so yeah, a lot of time outside, a lot of time solving problems, fixing things, learning things. And that's sort of what led me to being an engineer and also pursuing cascading eventually, even though I didn't know it at the time.
So outdoors has kind of always been in your life?
Yeah, my family's pretty outdoorsy. We were always camping. We sort of have a running family joke that whatever age my sister and I were is how far we would be able to start hiking. So, we were 8 and going on 8-mile hikes. Now that's a bit of a stretch, but
That's
there's
really cool.
pictures of us There's pictures of us up in the backpacks or in a canoe with my dad. So I spent a lot of time outside. And then if I wasn't outside, I always loved like learning new things and science and math and, doing sort of random experiments in my kitchen or, you know, making things explode outside. So
Right.
I've sort of always been like that.
Very cool. So how did cascading enter your life?
Right. So anytime I was outside as a kid, especially down here in the Southeast, we have a lot of water. So everything we did was around water. It's too hot to do anything else. So whether that was like rock hopping in the creeks or kayaking or fishing, it was always water. So then fast forward, I went to Georgia Tech. I loved it here. Really, really partied it up my first semester, I can totally admit. And then second semester, something was missing. Um, I'd left home, right, and I'm in the city. So I joined, it's called Outdoor Recreation Georgia Tech. So it's a department of our campus recreation center, and it's a professional organization of volunteer students who train in one of 9 different adventure sports to become staff in that sport to then take out other students on trips. Um, so that this Outdoor Recreation Georgia Tech, this ORGIT, is really important to me. Fast forward 4 years and I'm the president. It's an incredible organization. We have about 150 volunteer student staff. Um, so when you join and you decide you want to become staff, you pick a sport to specialize in. And I didn't know anything about canyoneering. I didn't know the word canyoneering. I didn't know it was a thing, but I knew I wanted a water sport. And so it was cascading, which I didn't know anything about. It was just a picture of a waterfall with somebody on a rope, or whitewater kayaking. And, full disclosure, whitewater kayaking had their meetings and their practices the same night as sorority parties. So I picked cascading, full disclosure. And it was something I didn't know anything about. And so I went on my first trip in January of 2018. And the beginner trip that we take out is just how to rappel on a waterfall. So there's no sort of the traditional canyoneering point A to point B. And it was January, and it's all the gear is communal. So the wetsuits are just these like 3mm overalls that we get from whitewater kayakers. I was afraid of heights. I've never been more cold or scared in my entire life. And then I got home and immediately signed up for the staff process because I had just never felt so alive doing anything else. So that's sort of how I got into cascading. And then over the next 3 years, I progressed from an instructor in training to an instructor. And then I'll be taking we call them checkout trips, to pass to become a trip leader actually in about a month.
Very awesome. That sounds like
So yeah, I think a lot of people who do outdoor sports can sort of relate to that. We call it type 2 fun. It's terrifying when you're doing it, and then you get home and you can't wait to do it again.
Exactly. When's the next trip? What else can I see? What's up?
Right, exactly. Like when can I do this again? So that was a really amazing experience. And there's a huge community aspect to it of sort of mentorship and training, right? It's by students, for students, no one's paid. So there's this really deep, cool devotion to learning and helping other people around you learn that's pretty special. So that kind of hooked me as well.
That's really, really awesome. It sounds like an incredible organization.
I'm very proud of it. For sure. I mean, Atlanta, I know you and I joked about this, right? Why Georgia Tech orders so much canyoneering gear. So it's, Atlanta might not be your first thought for a hub of outdoor adventurers, but it's it's something we're all very, really proud of, I think, and, makes us happy to contribute to and be a part of and show other people what's out there.
It definitely makes me want to plan a trip.
Yeah, we'd be happy to have you. We can you're welcome to stay in a bunk bed. We've got lots of dorms, or it's not exactly luxury living, but we have a good time.
Very cool. So, how is cascading different than other types of canyoneering?
Right. So that's the question of the hour, right? What is cascading? And I'll say every 2 or 3 years we have a debate of should we switch the name to canyoneering, right? Make it something people recognize, and but it's not canyoneering. So to other canyoneers, right, I would describe it as taking canyoneering techniques and gear, especially swift water aspects, and applying it to the waterfalls and the mountain creeks that we have in the Southeast. But if you don't know anything about canyoneering, which most people in the Southeast don't, since we don't have canyons, full confession, cascading is this really cool mix of waterfall rappelling, down climbing, and creek hiking, where you start at the top of a creek and then you keep going until you can reach the bottom, right? That sounds pretty familiar.
Hmm.
Basically, point A to point B by any means necessary. So that base aspect is pretty similar. Where it starts to all go crazy though, and especially to canyoneers, is nothing we have is bolted. I didn't use a bolted anchor until a canyoneering trip to Mexico in April. So everything we build is natural anchors. That's my specialty. That's what we teach to staff. Bolts just don't exist down here unless you're rock climbing. So big proponents of the natural anchor crew down here. And then of course the second aspect is there's no dry routes. There's no class A anything, because there's no canyons that are dry. So anything that's canyon shaped is going to be a waterway. So most of what we do is B and C1, I would say, and that's what we chase is the big waterfalls, the water, that sort of aspect of it. So those are probably the biggest differences between that and sort of canyoneering out west. Is there's so much water all the time, and all our anchors are natural. And then sort of on the flip side, I would say there's also, and this is great for us because as students we're in charge of people. There's a lot of liability. There's probably a little bit less, like the stakes aren't as high, I would say. It's pretty hard to find routes that have the really steep sidedness that people are used to when they think about canyons out west. So most of where we go have pretty functional escape routes or ways around things. So it creates this really interesting culture of having to chase or really seek out features or routes, new creeks, rather than, oh my gosh, I'm stuck in this slot in the earth all of a sudden, if that makes sense.
Right. Yeah. It kind of
Um,
does. What it,
yeah,
how far are the rappels typically? How long are they?
sure. So what the biggest one we do, we use it as training for the big rappels, is about 300 feet, but that's an anomaly. But most of our rappels probably lie between 50 and 150 feet um, on average, right? Depends on where you go. And we have some routes that are all down climbing, actually, or, really focused on down climbing. And then we have some places where we just go to get in a good rappel. So, it keeps everybody humble or excited, because as soon as you get out west or you go somewhere new and have a real quote unquote real canyon, it's like you're getting to do 8 different trips in one day.
Nice. So when you're on a cascading trip adventure,
Mm-hmm.
is it like you're going to the top and then having several rappels like you are in a canyon, or is it just like one rappel? I know it could probably changes through
Yeah,
the
it is
like
very
you said.
there are usually multiple rappels. So you'll rappel a little bit, you'll creek hike a good bit, you'll down climb, then you'll hit another rappel. So the routes that we sort of keep around, that we love, that we seek out, we go to often, are ones with multiple rappels for that practice.
Right. Okay.
And of course, that's why you're in it a lot of times, is for that experience. So it's definitely canyoneering, but it definitely has some of its own aspects that we've developed sort of uniquely for where we are, right? Um,
Yeah.
Everything
Perfect.
is green all the time. There are trees. There's organic material. There, the locations we seek out that have the big exposed rock like you would see out west, those are
Mhm.
our, chef's kiss, top tier locations for sure, but they're most of them aren't like that. So you're really sort of in the jungle, if you will, for a lot of it. And then, of course, I have to mention that the other big difference is there's nobody over the age of 25. We're all college students, all nerds, all engineers. The sport, quote unquote, was only started about 6 years ago now by students. Sean Gregory and now his wife, Rebecca Gregory, they ended up getting married, which is just the cutest thing ever. So the only cascader, if you will, over 25 or 26 is this guy, Joe. I don't know his last name. We just know him as Joe. So the 6 rope wiki entries that exist for the Southeast are all by him.
Nice.
From sort of a liability standpoint, we can't upload locations or share out data
Mm,
like that. It just kind of puts us at risk. So,
sure.
but Joe's put some of them up there, and whenever occasionally we run across a bolt or two or an anchor we didn't build, and we're like, oh, Joe's been here. So that's kind of the community down here. So it's been really fun as we've grown as an organization to connect with the canyoneering community out west and internationally. The Pacific Northwest actually has a lot of similarities to us. So we've learned a lot from that group and sort of become, a little bit more connected with the outside canyoneering world as
Mhm.
we've grown and learned more.
I've been to Uray, similar to what they have
Okay.
out there too. A lot of wet water canyons
Mhm.
like that.
For sure. For sure. Yeah, it's Pacific Northwest is on my list for sure.
Yeah. I was wondering about when you're saying that you're using natural anchors and stuff. Are you leaving
Mhm.
webbing behind or are you ghosting everything?
Yeah, so it really depends on the location. We try to avoid, in general, really popular hiking destinations, right? There's a lot of really amazing hikes down here that are 2 gorgeous waterfalls that we would love to sort of scout out and use as routes. But the Park Service down here, state and nationally, um, doesn't, you don't want to encourage unsafe behavior. So we tend to avoid popular hiking destinations because we want to be friends with the rangers, and we want them on our side. We don't want to be flaunting dangerous activity.
Yeah, exactly.
So a lot of our routes are sort of out of the way. And so if that's the case, we will leave webbing that's colored like the surrounding area and sort of tucked out of the way if we know that other people won't be coming across it.
Nice.
If there's a chance that it's by a hiking trail or people could sort of stumble upon it, we will clean it up on our way hiking back out. So it sort of depends on where we are.
Okay, cool. We are kind of, oh,
But yeah, if we can, we leave it, we do, because it's always nice. You can send another group and they'll know exactly what to look for because it'll still be there. And that ability to sort of examine a natural anchor that you come upon and decide if it's still good to use or you need to rebuild it is also a technique that all of your staff, especially upper level staff, have to have. So
right.
that's good training for that as well.
It's definitely good practice for when you're in another area too.
Mm-hmm.
So always be in that.
Right. So there's 1 year we don't always control the gear we get. We sort of submit orders, and 1 year our webbing order came in and it was like neon yellow, and we had to go to our director and say, I'm sorry, you got to return this. This is not leave no trace. We can't sling this up around a tree.
Right.
It doesn't blend in with the environment. It doesn't really represent how we want to sort of interact with the space.
Exactly. I was in a canyon in Zion recently and it was bright pink webbing. I
Oh
was like,
no.
what? We changed out as much as we could.
Sure. And listen, sometimes desperate times,
Wow.
desperate measures, but we try
Exactly.
and uh, we try and fly under the radar when we can.
That's awesome. Good to hear. So what are a few of your favorite
Yeah.
places to cast?
Yeah, so Pisgah National Forest, actually up in North Carolina, is the golden halo of cascading. Our two best routes are up there. The creeks are steep and narrow and rocky, and the water is always freezing, so that's an epic combination. It has our favorite slides. It has the best views, those moments where you get to stand and look out over the horizon line, and nobody else gets to see that view just like that. So that's our favorite place to go. But you have to wear a wetsuit, you know, all the way through, and July and August are about the only times you're safe without one because it's just always so cold up there. So it's sort of it's a rite of passage too. It's about 3.5 hours from Atlanta, so you get people who are going to stick around, become staff. You make the trek up there and show them Pisgah, sort of, if you will.
Nice. That
So
sounds amazing.
that's the place to be. It's really really beautiful up
I love slides in wet canyons. They're so
there.
much fun.
Oh, it's what we look for. I mean, I can totally admit, and canyoneers out west might laugh at this, but we have locations that we go to pretty much solely because they've got a slide at the end or something fun like that, or a jump, because it's pretty hard to find
Yeah, that
down
sounds fun.
here. Yeah.
So
And you're,
epic,
yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
do you have any epic
Oh, no,
first
no, no.
descent story?
Yeah, so actually I do. So in order to become a trip leader, so in our outdoor recreation Georgia Tech hierarchy of staff, one of the checkoffs is you have to have a first descent of a waterfall nobody in the sport has done before, right? Because you want to further the sport in our location pool. So for me, that was a waterfall on Scotsman's Creek up in the mountains of North Carolina. So this is a location we're actually currently developing to take groups to. So that's really exciting. And we'd actually found it on this horribly rainy camping trip 2 months earlier. We'd been like, oh, let's just hike to this waterfall. Maybe it'll be cool. And then we were like, okay, we've got to come back to this. But we had to wait for low water. It's a pretty heavy flow creek. But, spring and summer down here, anywhere that you got to wait for low water is off the table. So it just rains so much. So it'd been about 2 months, and the water flow was still pretty heavy, but it was safe enough for us to go. And it's basically this beautiful waterfall, but it's got this really heavy moving water flow, and then this like gnarly sharp ledge that kind of flips you into a free rappel. And I was going into it first without any beta. That's the point of the checkoff is, can you sort of design that beta? And it was the first time I had ever sort of had to rely solely on my own experience and my judgment to design the best wrap line, without sort of following a trip leader and older staff's instructions. So I totally banged myself up a little bit getting down. And if anyone had been standing at the bottom, they would have seen me go feet up and just sort of roll over the edge. But at the bottom, there's this beautiful, you get to the bottom, your feet hit ground, and there's this beautiful, sunny, splashy down climb that's waiting for you. And I got to be the first one that we know of to see it from that rappel vantage point. And I mean, that feeling of getting to stand where nobody else has stood is a feeling that I think is really valued across, canyoneering and cascading both. That,
Right.
You've worked really hard to get to stand in this one moment. So that sort of always stands out to me for a first descent because it wasn't the prettiest rappel I've ever done, but it was, something that I did first and scouted and sort of brought the team after me. So that was a sort of really important moment for me in my journey, to sort of get better and lead other students.
Very cool. Do you still
or have you switched locations where you rappel in
We
that
we do we do
location?
actually.
That's
This Scotsman's Creek is one of our new sort of works in progress, I would say. It's this sort of rare scenario where you go down the creek and you hit a river called the Chattooga, and then you move up the river to get to the exit point. So, which
Hmm,
is sort of rare, but it's a
that sounds good.
fun little day. With some really beautiful down climbs and a jump or two even, which are
Sounds
hard to come by
fun.
down here because we don't get those deep
Right.
that you do in a traditional canyon.
How long do you typically take? Are they like half day, full day? Does it vary?
So yeah, so it depends on who you're going with, right? Because we have trips all the way from 4 staff members taking out, 8 or so beginners to learn how to waterfall rappel, and those trips are official Georgia Tech trips, and that those have a very set structure that sort of take up a full day. And then you have days where it's, you and a friend who's also staff, and you run up and you do a creek in 2 hours, and then you come home. So I'd say anywhere from a half day by the time you drive somewhere and do the approach hike, half day to full day. We don't have any overnights really. Most things are pretty short, which, the pros are it really lets you enjoy it. You're not worried about racing out to beat the sunset usually. But the con is you're always looking for routes that are really full day
Mhm.
trips.
Are they for Georgia Tech students, or can other people come and join you?
Yeah, so there's a sort of divide. So once you're staff, you gain the ability to use the gear that belongs to Georgia Tech. So that's one of the sort of privileges of being volunteer staff. The trips that we take out through Georgia Tech, right? So we have a beginner trip, and an intermediate trip, and an advanced trip. Those are just for Georgia Tech students. Those are provided by Outdoor Recreation Georgia Tech and funded by Georgia Tech. And Orgit takes out about probably 50 or so of those trips a semester, which is pretty amazing across all the different sports. So
Nice.
those are Georgia Tech only. Really, our mission as an organization is to get people outside, provide a stress relief. It's a hard school.
Hmm.
It can really stress you out, and so Orgit as an organization is designed to provide opportunities to students in a, you just have to show up at our location the day of the trip, and we've got everything else for you: gear, transportation, staff expertise. So designed to sort of make those trips, if it's backpacking or mountain biking or rock climbing, more accessible to students who wouldn't, have the chance to do it otherwise. So we sort of operate within that mission and that organization. Yeah. Now, of course, once you're staff for a while, you've got your friends, and you start planning trips to, out west. Some friends and I just did a couple weeks in a van out in canyoneering out in Arizona and Southern California. So if you become staff, you stick around for a while, you start to sort of plan your own adventures, and you buy your own gear. You graduate from the communal wetsuits. So they're Georgia Tech trips, but they sort of provide a platform to meet like-minded people, I would say.
Right. Awesome.
Yeah.
So, on a different subject, have you had any near misses
Totally.
where you've learned valuable lessons?
Definitely. All the time. It's
Hmm.
interesting to try and pick one. But the one that comes to mind is, it's the trip that you would never want to be in that situation, but you also don't regret that it happened, because our whole team learned a lot. So this was maybe 2 years ago in the summer. I can give you this name. It's called Crane Creek, because we won't be going back. at all. So it's about a team of 6 of us. I'm intermediate at this point, and we've got sort of 3 more advanced staff, and then we've got these 2 beginners who, so this is, we call it scouting, first descent, right? Same thing, scouting trip. Sort of the classic story where our topo map estimates were really wrong. There were a lot more rappels than we'd seen on the map. It took a lot longer than we planned for. So it's already starting to get dark, and so we're already like, okay, let's move, let's hop out of the creek when we can. And then all of a sudden, this really intense, really localized summer storm blows in, and that's a really common occurrence in the mountains around here, where sort of one little pocket will get this just hurricane situation kind of out of the blue, just because of the humidity and the heat. And so all of a sudden, you know, somebody's on rappel, and then there's thunder and lightning and rain, and that's just not a place you want to be.
Right.
So we evac off the creek. We joke, I have a friend, I've never seen her rappel so fast, right? You'd think she was falling down the road. So we evac off the creek. We've got these beginners with us. We're shedding our metal gear like crazy. We're doing lightning squats. It's dark. We don't know where we are. It's a scouting trip. I'll interject here that all of our staff are anywhere from wilderness first aid to wilderness first responder trained. So everyone on the trip has training, and it's, you know, we're not calling search and rescue anytime soon, but it's definitely not a good place to be. So, but, you know, everyone gets into situations that they don't want to be in. But the sort of next part of the story is the takeaway that I always really remember out of it. So we send our 2 strongest members ahead. We take their gear. They're moving quickly. They're trying to like find the car, find a trail, and then there's 2 of us that stay with the beginners to kind of hike out. At this point, we're cold and hungry, and it's dark. And then all of a sudden, these little lights start flickering in the woods, raining. And we realize one of the beginners has never seen fireflies before. And it's this magical experience in the midst of a total crisis. We find a trail. And so at that point, it's just a matter of, okay, we're going to be cold and wet for a minute while we hike out to the car. And he's just freaking out over the concept of fireflies. And somebody starts singing in the middle of this rainstorm in this forest, and all of a sudden it was this moment of peace and just laughter in a totally bad situation that you would never repeat. And that's, I think, the biggest lesson I actually took away from that, is how to keep your head on straight and keep people calm, even if you're totally freaking out inside, and really just finding those moments everywhere. So yeah, that's my Crane Creek story. That's my you know, wouldn't ever want to do it again. It was definitely not a good place to be, but I know I talk about the people in the community that I cascade with a lot, but it's you know, really what you do it for at the end of the day. I've done trips where it was canyons, way better than anything we have in the Southeast, but it was total strangers, and it was beautiful and incredible. But all I could think about was, oh my gosh, this would be so much more incredible with my team and the people you know. And that trip really sort of cemented that for me, that who you do things with is 60% of the trip.
I agree, for sure. Yeah, that's
yeah.
and
I mean, you've got
it magical. They are.
Yeah. No, I mean, it was just this crazy thing, where we don't get fireflies every year. Even it's sort of random which years you'll get them out in full force, and to have them come out right at this moment where everyone is really struggling was so cool. Yeah. Look at this. Yeah. Exactly.
Experience totally nothing to do with canyoneering, but we had ran out of gas in South Dakota on a real street nowhere. and I saw these blinking lights in the cornfields, and I was like, "What is that?" And he was like, "They're fireflies. They call them lightning bugs. I think
Aw.
they're the same though." Um,
Okay.
but I had
Yeah,
never
for sure.
that before. Like I'd seen it on movies, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I thought it was just like this pretend thing that somebody made up. So to see them in real life, like it
Right.
was like a totally bad situation. Like we're out of gas, we have to walk forever. But then we see these
Right.
lightning
Oh,
bugs,
that's not
and it's
good.
like totally amazing.
It's, things you wouldn't see or things you wouldn't
Exactly.
experience or learn about yourself
Mm-hmm.
without
That's not
being
that situation happen.
in a situation like that, for sure.
That's so if you only get to Cascade, where would you go and why?
Hmm. That's hard. Okay, so I'm gonna cheat on the question a little bit. It's actually in North Carolina, but it's my favorite creek in the world. It's up in that Pisgah National Forest area. A friend and I, she's also staff, hold the unofficial speed record for it, just out of our group. I've done this creek maybe probably over 10 times now, so I know I think I could do the sequences blind. Um, but I have these really amazing memories of it being this daunting, beautiful, tall, scary challenge the first few times I went. There's a big jump between the stuff up in Pisgah that we take people to and the trips that we do before that to prep.
Mm-hmm.
So it's always this challenge, this brand new thing, and then now it's like you're coming home to an old friend at this point. So that mix of familiarity and exhilaration for me is
Mm-hmm.
totally addicting. So if I only had one more day, that's where I would go. Because I feel like I probably know it better than the back of my hand at this point.
Very awesome. I feel that same way about Sprite.
Yeah.
And like that was my
Okay.
first one. Every time I go back to it, I'm just like, that used to scare me so bad, and now it's so easy. Like I just watch myself change.
Right.
Yeah, it's really cool.
Yeah, and I know you've got kids, and I obviously don't, but that idea of sort of being able to see yourself at every stage of growth in one place is always really cool for me.
I like.
Because you take your sons into canyons, right?
Well, I take my daughters sometimes. I'm hoping to take the
Okay.
grandkids soon. They're getting to that age. I
That's
have a
so
3-year-old
cool.
grandson that just loves outdoors. Like we went camping a couple weekends ago, and he wakes up in the morning and he's like, "I guess the forest is going to be our new home." And like
Aw,
it broke
that's
his heart when we told him we had.
oh no. He thought
So
he
I
was there for
really
good.
yeah, want to get him on rope, maybe this summer. And I have a couple other grandsons that live further away, but
Okay.
I can hike with them more and I'm out on ropes too.
They're
So
gonna come usurp us right now. We take a lot of probably too much pride in being the young crew,
mhm.
but I don't know if we can beat a 5-year-old on rappel.
Guiding experiences. When I was a guide, I had a family of 4. It was a mom and dad, and then a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old. And it was
Okay.
the
Oh my
first time
gosh.
I had ever guided by myself.
Hmm.
And I didn't realize I was taking these young kids.
Oh wow.
When I go to pick them up, I'm like, oh my God, this is gonna like what? And we get into the canyon, and the longest rappel in this particular canyon was like 70 feet.
Okay.
Pretty easy, like angled rappel, fluted, and there's no
Hmm.
real like overhangs or anything.
Sure.
Um, but Tony, every time she would get to the bottom, the 3-year-old, she would get to the rappel, and pretty much like we're lowering them, like I have them on a top away.
Right. I was about to say that you gotta just like
And
toss them around like a rope bag. I mean, I don't know.
because they really don't have enough weight to like repel on their own. But
Sure.
they think they're repelling. They think it's awesome, right? But
Mhm.
she would get
Yep.
to the bottom, and every time she's like, "Can we do it again? Can we do it again?"
Aw.
Her brother climbed up a little bit. She's like climbing up higher just to prove it.
Uh,
So she was so
they're the
cool.
best. Uh,
But
mhm.
it's always, if you get outdoors in like rock climbing or canyoneering or some type of sport when they're
Right.
young, like it's just going to be really impactful as they get older.
Oh, I mean, 100%. That's the best feeling in the world, especially on these beginner trips where all we're teaching is waterfall rappelling, right? That all happens in stages. So you have somebody come down their first rappel and they unrig and they're like, oh my gosh, can I do that again? And it's the best feeling to be able to be like, yes, you literally just hike back up and do it again.
Go ahead.
Right, exactly. And it feels like you're doing something right.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Way less outdoor time for America
Yeah,
would like
yeah, I think
everybody's mental state, I think.
for sure. As somebody who has to spend a lot of time in front of a computer Monday to Friday, definitely ditching it Saturday to Sunday is the way to go.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, it's a really unique balance, I think, with going to a very technical, sort of STEM-oriented school, for sure, to then, everybody thinks like an engineer, and that definitely transitions over to trips, right? You get these spreadsheets, and people are like, calculating rope lengths and, talking about anchor forces, and
That's
it's
really
a
neat.
good laugh. Yeah.
That's really
And so we're slowly branching out um, into the wider canyoneering world, and it's a lot to learn.
yeah, for sure. Well, I don't know about you.
Yeah.
Personally make me really, really hungry. What is your
Yeah.
favorite in canyon snack?
Okay, so I think the best canyon snack I've ever had, I was canyoneering in Mexico in April, and you legally have to have a guide with you. But it was a team of, I was, was super experienced canyoneers, so the guides are sort of there for fun. And they packed in um, they were like packets of refried beans and almost like barbecue, I think like pulled pork, and then a pot, and they would halfway through the canyon would build this little campfire, and then you got a hot canyon lunch, which is just the most luxurious thing I could ever think of, with like beans and pork on like little crackers, and it's warm, and you've been freezing the whole day, even in Mexico. So that's probably the best canyon snack I've ever had. But day to day, I go for Pop Tarts because I don't buy them at home. My rule is that I only buy them for outdoors trips.
Nice.
Yeah.
Some
So
good sugar and energy probably to get through
yeah,
the
it's
day.
my go-to sort of
A little treat.
treat. Yeah. So that box has big Sharpie, like, can't, cascading only written on it in my pantry.
That's nice. Very cool. How
Um,
about your favorite after canyon beverage?
so I've only officially been able to drink for a year or two. So the margarita post trip is just the best thing ever. We always go to Mexican food afterwards. I'm not sure why, but it's a tradition. Um, so that's
Nice.
probably my go-to after canyon beverage the last couple years, now that I'm actually legal.
Very cool.
For
I feel
sure.
like I had Mexican food a lot too, actually, now that I'm thinking about
Yeah.
it.
I don't know, are like all the mountain towns sort of in the southeast, they all have essentially the same Mexican restaurant. Um, and everyone has an opinion about, whose is better, and they're pretty much all the same.
That's silly, huh? I feel like it's the same way
Yeah.
here.
Yeah, just, whatever you get attached to. And there's one place specifically that one day I'm going to do the math, because I think it has to be solely supported by Orchid staff going there after trips. It's kind of at this convergence of the cavers and the whitewater kayakers and the cascaders all sort of go back through this town. So you'll always run into friends at this Mexican restaurant if you go there on a Saturday or Sunday night, because there's always somebody coming back from a trip.
That sounds awesome.
Yeah,
Like the little cheers of Georgia.
exactly.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So there's caves in that area also?
Yeah, so we're in it's called the TAG region. So that's Tennessee, Alabama, Georgia,
Okay.
is one of the best regions for caves, as I've heard in the US. But it's funny that caving down here is definitely a really different sport. It's sort of funny to talk to people who are from out west where, if you canyoneer, you also cave and you sort of do a lot of the rope sports.
hmm
But it's pretty separate here, especially through Outdoor Recreation Georgia Tech, where what makes us successful is you sort of pick a sport to specialize in to staff,
Okay.
and that kind of takes your time. So it is funny. I'll meet people and they'll be like, "Oh, so you cave as well?" And I'm like, "No, I have done a beginner cave that was horizontal, and that was so fun, and that is where I will end my caving career."
Yeah.
Is right at that beginner level, and you can ask the cavers the same thing, and they'll oh no, I don't canyoneer, I don't cascade, that's a different sport.
Yeah.
um so but the caving in this area is very abundant and really beautiful.
Cool.
So if that's your thing, Southeast is a good place for it as well.
I personally think I'm a little too claustrophobic for caving. Like I do like to, even though sometimes the canyons are dark, I do like to look up and see the sky. But I do have
you're
friends that
you're
are
reading
totally
my
into
you're
caving.
reading my mind. That's how I feel too. I mean, I always say, like, I love canyoneering, cascading, because it feels like you're being held in the palm of the mountain, right? And then that's
That's a good way to put it. I like that.
the draw. That's the draw for me.
Yeah.
Um,
Cool.
so
We're the same on that. Yeah, I have friends that try to get me into caves, and I'm just like, I don't know. Haven't done it yet.
right. So yeah, no, I mean, I a lot of my friends are cavers, and they're great. And when it's 95 outside, and that the cave is going to be 58 degrees year round, it's tempting.
That is tempting.
Um, but you got to see the sky for me. And if there's no water, I'm less interested too.
Well, if you
So yeah.
were in the world, where would you go and why?
Oh, okay. That's hard. Let me see. I think I would actually go back to Spain. So I have a Spanish minor, and I spent a semester there in 2019, and I loved it. So I'd go back for that alone, but I kind of got myself into a Swiftwater Canyon out there with a team of Spanish canyoneers, and I really wasn't prepared for it at the time. And I was with basically a group of guides, so I was safe, but it kind of messed up my head for a while. But I have a lot more experience now, and I'd love to go back and get to do some of those. They've got beautiful, beautiful Swiftwater canyons, in sort of
Yeah,
the northeast part of Spain.
I've seen
So
some
I'd love to go
photos. They
back
look amazing.
and get to do, yeah, I'd love to go back and get to do those canyons with joy, not
hmm
just not just fear, which is sort of how I remember it. And I loved Barcelona as well, so that whole city is just beautiful. So I'd love to go back to Spain and sort of redo that experience with the right amount of expertise now.
Very cool.
So that's
That
probably
sounds
the next
awesome.
one on my list. Yeah.
That sounds cool. All right. Well,
But mhm.
anywhere else you want to go?
Oh, sorry, no, I was saying, for now I'm have to graduate college, so I'll be in Atlanta for a while. That has to happen first before any any big adventures. I already ditched for a week this semester to go canyoneer in Mexico. I don't know if you've ever met Michelle Nillis or heard of her, but she had an open spot, and I emailed my professors, and I was like, I'm going to be gone,
Going
and
to
I will
Mexico.
make up my grades when I get back. So I think I've already pushed my luck enough
Right.
for 1 year.
Uh,
I'll graduate in May 2022. I took 2020 off to work because classes were online and it just wasn't a good time. So I worked for a medical device company. So I'll do full five years of college, which is pretty common at this school, and then I'll be more and less time, is what I've heard,
You
to do canyons.
school, but then you're like,
I need a job, right? So we'll see. But canyoneering on a student budget is always a challenge. So we're gonna graduate and hopefully upgrade some gear, get to some cool places, and see how that goes.
Like canyoning equipment is once you get it, you're pretty much set, right? Unless you
Right.
shot in your rope or something like that. Replace those once in a while, but
For sure.
this part.
Yeah. For the most part, once you've got a basis, you're good for a while.
And you can share ropes with friends, so not everyone has
Yes, for sure. Definitely the people who buy ropes, you pour out a beer for them because they take one for the team.
The people that
Oh yeah.
meals.
For sure.
All right. Well, awesome. Is there any safety tips you'd like to give our listeners before we say goodbye?
Oh my gosh, I'm running through our whole we have a whole safety checkoff. Honestly, this one, cascading is always wet for us, so it's always cold. Even in Georgia, we're using community gear, so you've got wetsuits with holes in the butt. I mean, nobody's ever warm. So we always toss a little pocket rocket stove and hot chocolate packets into somebody's keg. So especially like for new participants who might not have great gear or aren't used to it, the difference that it makes to be able to like make hot chocolate halfway through the day and like warm people up is mind-blowing, how much that can like improve the whole experience. So that's sort of been our saving grace, is like a really easy, low cost sort of safety way to keep everybody warm, keep everybody's spirits high. And then we chatted about this earlier, is never be afraid to retie an anchor. For us, that's really important because there's a lot of time sometimes in between going to locations, even locations we know and have been a lot. So we always tell people it's always better to retie it and remake your own if you're unsure than to use one that you're like, I think that looks fine.
Right.
Because that's how you get into trouble. So hot chocolate and tying anchors, you had to know two things about the sport.
That's such a great idea with the hot chocolate and warming up. And when you were talking about your snack earlier, it did bring me back to, we were doing Imlay Canyon, which is a really long day here in Zion.
Okay.
It's one of our more major canyons.
Sure.
And one of the guys was like, let's bring, I'll bring a stove. Everyone bring a lunch to warm bean soup. And yeah, when I was freezing, just to be able to eat something warm.
Yeah, it's
the experience.
Totally. Yeah, no, for sure. Emily's on my list. I know that's one of the famous ones. Our group will send like, oh my gosh, we have like the master canyon list of things west of the Rockies that you have to go do. So
I've done it.
That one's on our list for sure.
I did it when it was full, and I've done it when it was.
Okay.
It's a challenge both ways. It's
right.
But it's definitely an awesome canyon. When you come out,
awesome. For sure. Thank you so much for having me on your show. You should have seen it. I found it on Spotify and I sent it to her group and we're like, there's finally a canyon podcast, because we'll look through all the other outdoor podcasts and be like, oh, this episode talks about canyons.
That's
so this was
for you. And so I'm like, you know what? I'm just gonna start it myself. And I know nothing
exactly
editing. I know nothing about audio. I'm totally teaching myself. It's working. And I've gotten a lot of great feedback. So thank you to participate and talk to us.
Of course. So yeah, if you ever find yourself in Atlanta, let us know. And thanks again for letting me chat about this group of, engineering students canyoneering where there are no canyons.
Yeah, that's so exciting. I'm glad people are getting outdoors, even in the city.
For sure. Yeah, it's pretty special.
All right. Well, thanks for your
Yeah,
time. I think the canyons are calling, so we gotta go.
perfect. Awesome. Thanks so much, Charles.
Yep. Bye-bye.
Bye.
And the other intro music at the beginning was by Tig Booth. There's a link to him as well. All right, thanks for listening to the show. Who's ready to go to Atlanta to go cascading with Hill? I know I am. I never really had considered Atlanta as a vacation destination until now. Anyway, if you enjoy the show, you can join us on our Facebook group page, The Canyons Are Calling podcast. There's a link to that in the show notes. I'm also semi-active on Instagram at Canyons Are Calling on Instagram. If you have an idea for the show or just want to shout out to me, you can do that at thecanyonsarecalling@gmail.com. You can also check out Emily Canyon Gear at Canyoneering USA. You can read more about canyoneering, Tom's latest raves, find out information about Utah canyons, and order canyoneering gear from there. Give me something to do. If you enjoy this beautiful hand pan music in the background, shout out to Z the Handpan Man. You can find him at zthehandpanman.com. Anyway, the canyons are calling now. I gotta go.